I had just spent 18 hours removing 40 bullets from a dying Navy SEAL when my commanding officer walked into my operating room and told me I was being court-martialed for disobeying direct orders. Before we dive in, tell us where in the world are you watching from? If you enjoy stories like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow's episode is truly mind-blowing. Let's get started. My name is Dr. Celeste Rivera, and I'm a military trauma surgeon. For the past 2 years, I'd been stationed at Landstuhl Regional Medical Center in Germany, the largest American military hospital outside the United States. Every day, I watched helicopters land with broken soldiers from Iraq and Afghanistan. Every day, I fought death in operating rooms that smelled like antiseptic and determination. And every single day, I followed orders without question. I grew up in San Antonio, Texas, where my father, Miguel, worked double shifts at a factory just to put me through medical school. My mother, Sarah, an Irish-American nurse, taught me that healing was the highest calling anyone could have. My younger brother, Dante, joined the Marines right after high school, telling me at his graduation dinner, "Celeste, you save lives with your hands. I'm going to protect lives with mine." That conversation convinced me to serve in military medicine instead of taking the comfortable civilian job at Houston Methodist that was waiting for me. For 32 years, I had been the good daughter, the perfect student, the surgeon who never questioned authority. I believed in the chain of command. I believed that following protocol saved lives. I believed that the military was a force for good in the world, and that my role was to patch up our heroes so they could go home to their families. But on October 15th, 2019, everything I believed about duty, honor, and the system I served was about to be shattered in one blood-soaked night. The blood on my scrubs wasn't even dry when they handed me the dismissal papers. My hands were still shaking from exhaustion after the longest surgery of my career. I had just saved a man's life against direct orders from my superiors, and instead of gratitude, I was facing a court-martial that could end everything I had worked for. But what happened in the next 24 hours would expose a conspiracy that went all the way to the Pentagon. It would turn me from an obedient soldier into a whistleblower. It would cost me everything I thought I wanted and give me something I never knew I needed. And it would prove that sometimes the most patriotic thing you can do is disobey orders. This is the story of how saving one Navy SEAL's life taught me the difference between following orders and doing what's right. This is the story of the night that changed everything. 2 years at Landstuhl Regional Medical Center had taught me that war has a rhythm. Every morning at 0600, I'd walk through the hospital corridors that bustled with controlled urgency. Nurses rushed between rooms carrying IV bags and medication trays. Physical therapists worked with amputees learning to walk again. The smell of disinfectant mixed with the constant hum of medical equipment created a soundtrack that had become as familiar as my own heartbeat. My team had become my second family. Nurse Commander Patricia Chen, who everyone called Patty, had been my surgical assistant for 18 months. She was a third-generation Chinese-American from Seattle whose precision matched my own. During long surgeries, we'd developed an almost telepathic understanding. When I needed sutures, her hand was already reaching for them. When complications arose, she'd anticipate my next move before I'd even made it. Dr. Benjamin Torres, our anesthesiologist, reminded me so much of my uncle Roberto that I'd catch myself expecting him to break into Spanish during procedures. Benjamin had this calming presence that could steady even the most panicked soldier. He'd talk to unconscious patients during surgery, telling them about his 3 kids back in Arizona, describing his daughter's soccer games or his son's piano recitals. He said it helped him remember that these weren't just bodies on tables, but someone's children going home. Then there was Colonel James Whitmore, our hospital administrator. At 62, he carried himself with the dignity of someone who'd served his country for 4 decades. He'd taken me under his wing when I first arrived in Germany, nervous and overwhelmed by the responsibility of military medicine. During my first week after I'd lost a 19-year-old soldier from Kansas, Colonel Whitmore found me crying in the supply closet. "Dr. Rivera," he had said quietly, "grief means you care. The day you stop feeling it is the day you should hang up your scrubs." His office walls were covered with photographs of soldiers he'd helped heal over the years. Wedding pictures, baby photos, graduation ceremonies. He called it his victory wall, proof that our work mattered beyond these hospital corridors. But by October 2019, something was eating at me. 3 weeks before everything changed, I was on a video call with my sister Isabella. She was in her apartment in Austin grading papers from her 3rd grade class when I finally voiced what had been haunting me. Izzy, I saved these boys and send them back to fight. Yesterday, I operated on a Marine who'd been here twice before. Same kid, different injuries. Sometimes I wonder if I'm helping them or just prolonging their suffering. Isabella set down her red pen and looked directly into the camera. Celeste, you're giving them a chance to come home to their families. That's everything. That's literally everything. Her words should have comforted me, but they didn't. Because I'd started noticing things that didn't make sense. Patients would arrive with specific injuries, and before I could complete their treatment, they'd be transferred to other facilities. When I'd asked Dr. Hammond, my supervising physician, about the medical necessity of these moves, he'd give me a look that made my skin crawl. Dr. Rivera, not every decision requires your input, he'd say, his voice carrying a warning I couldn't quite decipher. Files would disappear from my desk. Soldiers I'd been treating would vanish from the patient roster without explanation. When I'd inquire about their status, I'd be told the information was classified above my clearance level. 3 months earlier, I'd treated an Army Ranger named Corporal Mitchell who'd taken shrapnel in both legs. His recovery was progressing perfectly when Dr. Hammond informed me he was being transferred to Ramstein Air Base immediately. But sir, he needs at least another week of wound care, I'd protested. Moving him now risks infection. Dr. Hammond's jaw had tightened. Doctor, your job is to follow medical protocols, not question administrative decisions. I'd watched them wheel Corporal Mitchell away, his confused eyes meeting mine as the transport team rushed him toward the helicopter. 2 weeks later, I learned he'd died of sepsis at Ramstein, an infection that could have been prevented with proper care. That night, I called my father back in San Antonio. Papa, something's not right here. I feel like I'm being kept from doing my job properly. Miguel Rivera, who'd fought for workers' rights his entire life, had taught me to trust my instincts. Mija, he said in his gravelly voice, when something feels wrong, it usually is. But be careful. Sometimes the truth comes. With a price. I thought I understood what he meant. I had no idea how expensive that truth would become. October 15th started like any other night shift. I was reviewing patient charts in the trauma bay when the alarm klaxon shattered the 0200 quiet. 3 minutes later, the distinctive thump of Black Hawk rotor blades echoed across the compound. Emergency admissions always carried a particular energy, but something about this felt different. The radio chatter was more urgent, more secretive. I was suiting up in the scrub room when Dr. Hammond burst through the doors. His face was flushed and sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool German autumn air filtering through the vents. Dr. Rivera, you're not needed for this admission. Dr. Peterson will handle the incoming casualties. Peterson was competent, but he was a general surgeon, not a trauma specialist. Sir, if it's a trauma case, shouldn't I? You have your orders, doctor. Return to your rounds. But before I could respond, Patty Chen appeared in the doorway. Her usual composed demeanor was cracked with urgency. Dr. Rivera, we need you in Trauma 1 immediately. We have a Navy SEAL who's barely holding on. Hammond stepped between us. Nurse Commander Chen, I specifically instructed that Dr. Peterson would handle this case. With respect, sir, Patty replied, her voice steady but firm. Peterson took one look at this patient and requested Dr. Rivera immediately. This is beyond general surgery. I pushed past Hammond into Trauma 1 and felt my breath catch. The Navy SEAL on the gurney was more bullet holes than man. Blood soaked through multiple field dressings and his vital signs were bouncing erratically on the monitors. His dog tags read, Devon Ashworth, Petty Officer First Class. Jesus, I whispered, beginning my preliminary examination. The bullet wounds covered his torso, arms, and legs in a pattern I'd never seen before. These weren't random hits from a firefight. They were methodical, concentrated, like someone had used him for target practice. Dr. Rivera, step away from that patient immediately. Hammond's voice cut through the medical chaos like a blade. This patient is being transferred to Ramstein Air Base. The transport team is already en route. I looked at Devon's vitals again. Blood pressure dropping, heart rate erratic, breathing shallow. Sir, this man will die if we move him. His lung is punctured. He's losing blood faster than we can replace it. And I count at least 40 entry wounds that need surgical attention. That's not your decision to make. This patient is classified above your clearance level. The words hit me like a physical blow. In 2 years of military service, I had never been told that saving a life was above my clearance level. I stared at the unconscious SEAL, thinking of my brother Dante somewhere in Afghanistan, thinking of all the mothers who would never see their sons again. With all due respect, sir, I took an oath to do no harm. I'm not letting this soldier die because of bureaucracy. Hammond's face turned red. Dr. Rivera, if you touch that patient, you'll be facing a court-martial for disobeying direct orders. Your career will be over. The trauma bay fell silent, except for the beeping monitors and Devon's labored breathing. Patty stood beside me, and I could feel Dr. Torres shifting nervously behind the anesthesia cart. Everyone was waiting for my decision. I looked down at Devon Ashworth again. This time I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The bullet entry points weren't consistent with enemy fire. The angles were wrong. These shots came from close range, from multiple directions. This wasn't combat wounds from a firefight. This was an execution attempt. Patty, prep him for surgery. Dr. Torres, I need him under in 5 minutes. Dr. Rivera, I'm ordering you to step away from that patient. I turned to face Hammond, my hands already reaching for surgical gloves, and I'm refusing that order. Lock the OR doors. As my team sprang into action, I caught Patty's eye. She moved closer and whispered urgently, Celeste, don't say this out loud, but look at those wound patterns. These walls have ears. She was right. I'd seen enough combat injuries to know the difference between battlefield wounds and point-blank executions. Someone had tried to kill Devon Ashworth, and now they wanted him dead before he could talk. Just as Dr. Torres began administering anesthesia, Devon's eyes fluttered open. His hand shot out and grabbed my wrist with surprising strength for someone losing so much blood. Doctor, he whispered, his voice barely audible above the medical equipment. They tried to silence me. The mission was a setup. Don't let them. Transfer me. They'll finish what they started. His grip loosened and his eyes closed as the anesthesia took hold, leaving me with the terrifying realization that I wasn't just fighting to save a life. I was fighting to protect a witness. The surgery took 18 hours. 18 hours of extracting bullets from muscles, repairing punctured organs, and stopping internal bleeding. 18 hours of Patty handing me instruments with surgical precision, while Dr. Torres monitored vitals and whispered encouragement to our unconscious patient. 18 hours of removing 40 bullets, each one telling a story I didn't want to believe. By the time I finished the final sutures, my hands were cramping, and my vision was blurry from exhaustion. Devon Ashworth was stable. His breathing was steady, his heart rate normal, and the monitors showed all the signs of a successful surgery. I had saved his life. That's when Dr. Hammond returned with 2 military police officers. Dr. Celeste Rivera, the first MP announced, reading from official papers. You are being charged with willful disobedience of direct orders and compromising classified operations. You will be escorted to quarters and remain there pending court-martial proceedings. I pulled off my surgical gloves slowly, my mind racing. I saved that man's life. You violated direct orders, Hammond replied coldly. Your personal feelings about medical ethics don't supersede military command structure. Colonel Whitmore appeared in the doorway, and for a moment I felt a surge of hope. He had always been my advocate, my mentor. Surely he would understand. Colonel Whitmore, please, I started, but he held up his hand to stop me. Dr. Rivera, you've been reassigned to Walter Reed Medical Center in Maryland, effective immediately. You'll be escorted to a transport flight departing at 800. The betrayal hit me harder than Hammond's threats had. Colonel Whitmore wouldn't meet my eyes as he spoke. The man who had comforted me during my first loss, who had called me one of the finest surgeons he'd ever worked with, was abandoning me when I needed him most. Sir, with respect, that patient will need continued post-operative care. His recovery will be handled by appropriate personnel. Whitmore interrupted. Your involvement in this case is terminated, as the MPs prepared to escort me out. Patty stepped forward. "Dr. Rivera, you forgot this." She handed me a small flash drive, pressing it firmly into my palm. "Your surgical notes from tonight, for your records." I understood immediately. During the surgery, while I had been focused on saving Devon's life, Patty had been documenting everything. The unusual wound patterns, the close-range bullet trajectories, the evidence that this wasn't enemy fire but friendly fire. She had been protecting both of us. Back in my quarters, I stared at the flash drive and made the decision that would change everything. I called my cousin Marcus Rivera, an investigative journalist for the Washington Post. Marcus had been covering military affairs for 8 years, and he had always told family members that if we ever saw something that didn't smell right, we should call him. "Marcus, it's Celeste. I need to tell you something, but I need to know it stays between us until you can verify everything independently." "What's going on, Prima?" I told him everything. The suspicious patient transfers I'd been noticing, Corporal Mitchell's preventable death, Devon Ashworth's execution-style wounds, Hammond's threats, Whitmore's betrayal. Marcus listened without interrupting, asking only technical questions that showed he understood the implications. "Celeste, what you're describing sounds like a cover-up, but you need to understand what you're getting into. If you go public with this, they'll try to destroy you." I thought about my father's words from 3 weeks earlier. Sometimes the truth comes with a price. I thought about Devon's desperate whisper in the trauma room. They tried to silence me. I thought about all the soldiers who might die if this conspiracy continued. "Marcus, I became a doctor to save lives. If staying quiet means more soldiers die, then what's the point of everything I've worked for?" "Okay, I'll need the medical files, photographs of the wounds, and any documentation you have. Can you get all of that to me?" I looked at Patty's flash drive. "I already have it." That night I made one more call, to Devon Ashworth's bedside, where he was finally conscious and stable. "Devon, it's Dr. Rivera. How are you feeling?" His voice was weak but clear, like someone used me for target practice, but alive thanks to you. "Doctor, they're going to try to bury this, aren't they?" "Not if I can help it. They'll come after you for saving me. You know that, right?" I looked out my window at the German countryside, knowing this might be my last night here. "Devon, sometimes doing what's right means accepting the consequences. You were willing to die to expose the truth. I guess I can handle losing my career." "Dr. Rivera," Devon said quietly, "you didn't just save my life tonight. You gave me the chance to finish what I started." As I hung up the phone, I realized there was no going back. In a few hours, Marcus would have the evidence he needed to expose everything. By tomorrow, this story would be public, and my life as I knew it would be over. But Devon Ashworth would be alive to tell his story, and that made everything worth it. I woke up at 0600 in my hotel room in Kaiserslautern to my phone buzzing like an angry wasp. 17 missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize. 23 text messages. My voicemail was completely full. The first call was from Marcus. "Celeste, you need to check the Washington Post website right now. The story went live 20 minutes ago." With trembling fingers, I opened my laptop and navigated to the homepage. There it was, the top story with a headline that made my heart skip. "Navy SEAL nearly killed to cover up war crimes. Military doctor risks career to save him." Below the headline was Marcus's byline and a photograph of Devon in his dress blues, taken before his deployment. The article was detailed, devastating, and everything I had hoped it would be. Marcus had independently verified every claim, found additional sources, and built a case that was impossible to ignore. My phone rang again, CNN, then Fox News, then NBC. Word was spreading faster than I could have imagined. The real story was even worse than I had suspected. Devon Ashworth hadn't just been a Navy SEAL. He had been a whistleblower who had uncovered evidence that his commanding officer, Colonel Ryan Blackwood, had been running illegal arms deals with Syrian rebel groups. When Devon had threatened to report the operation to naval intelligence, Blackwood's response had been swift and brutal. The mission that nearly killed Devon had been fabricated entirely. There was no legitimate target, no enemy engagement. Blackwood, had sent Devon and 3 other SEALs into a Syrian compound, then ordered his own men to open fire on them. Devon was the only survivor because he had managed to take cover behind a concrete wall when the shooting started. But the most shocking revelation was in the final paragraphs of Marcus's article. Colonel Whitmore hadn't betrayed me. He had been feeding information to Marcus for months, documenting the suspicious patient transfers and unexplained deaths that he suspected were connected to cover-ups. His cold dismissal of me had been an act designed to protect both of us while the investigation continued. At 07:30, my phone rang with a call from Washington, D.C. Dr. Rivera, this is General Patricia Morrison, Office of the Secretary of Defense. Your court-martial has been suspended indefinitely pending a full investigation into the allegations in this morning's Washington Post article. We need you to return to Germany immediately to provide testimony. Within 2 hours of the story breaking, the Pentagon had launched a full investigation. Devon's medical records, combined with Patty's photographic evidence and the testimony of the other medical staff, provided irrefutable proof that the wounds were from friendly fire. By noon, Colonel Ryan Blackwood was in custody. By 1400 hours, 6 other officers involved in the arms-dealing operation had been arrested. Devon's story had blown apart a corruption network that stretched from Syria to the Pentagon. At 1500, my phone rang with a call I had been hoping for. Dr. Rivera, this is Devon. I wanted you to be the first to know. Naval Intelligence just finished debriefing me. They're saying the evidence you preserved is going to put Blackwood and his people away for life. Devon, how are you feeling? Are you getting proper medical care? Thanks to you, I'm going to make a full recovery. But, more than that, you gave me the chance to serve my country the right way, the way it's supposed to be done. I started crying then. 18 hours of exhaustion and stress finally catching up with me. I was so scared I had made the wrong choice. Doctor, you made the only choice. If you hadn't saved me, Blackwood would still be out there, and more. Good soldiers would have died for his greed. That evening, Colonel Whitmore called me personally. Dr. Rivera, I owe you an apology for yesterday morning. I had to make it look like I was following orders while I gathered evidence for the investigation. Colonel, I understand. You were protecting everyone. No, Celeste. You were protecting everyone. What you did took courage I'm not sure I would have had. The Secretary of Defense wants to meet with you personally. There's talk of a commendation. But the call that meant the most came at 2000 hours from my father in San Antonio. Mija, I just saw the news. Your mother and I are so proud of you. Papa, I almost lost everything. No, Celeste. You almost found everything. You found out who you really are. As I sat in that German hotel room, watching news reports about the arrests and the investigation, I realized that my father was right. 24 hours ago, I had been a surgeon who followed orders. Now I was a surgeon who followed her conscience, and the difference was everything. 6 months later, I was back in surgery, but everything had changed. The operating room at Walter Reed Medical Center in Maryland buzzed with the same controlled urgency I remembered from Loungestool, but now I carried a different kind of authority. Chief of Trauma Surgery at 32 years old, promoted not despite my disobedience, but because of it. The Pentagon had implemented new protocols protecting medical personnel who advocate for their patients against administrative pressure. They called them the Rivera Protocols, though I would have preferred they not use my name. The changes were simple but revolutionary. No patient could be transferred against medical advice without written justification from 2 independent physicians, and medical personnel had the right to document and report any interference with patient care. My team at Walter Reed knew my story, and it had changed how they approached their work. During a particularly complex surgery on a soldier injured in Afghanistan, my surgical assistant mentioned how the new protocols had already saved 3 lives in other military hospitals. Dr. Rivera, she said as we worked, knowing we have the backing to fight for our patients makes all the difference. But the real measure of change came through individual moments. 3 weeks after my promotion, I received a letter from Corporal Mitchell's mother in Ohio. She had read about the investigation and learned that her son's death at Ramstein could have been prevented. Dr. Rivera, she wrote, I can't bring my boy back, but knowing that other mothers won't lose their sons the same way gives me peace. Thank you for having the courage I wish someone had shown for Michael. That letter sits framed in my office, next to a photograph Colonel Whitmore sent me from his victory wall. It shows Devon Ashworth at his daughter's high school graduation, healthy and whole. Devon had made a full recovery and received the Navy Cross for valor in exposing the corruption network. Colonel Blackwood and his associates were serving sentences ranging from 15 to 25 years in federal prison. The arms dealing operation had been dismantled completely, but the changes went deeper than policy and justice. Last month, during a video call with my family back in San Antonio, my brother Dante said something that stopped me cold. "Celeste, you know what the guys in my unit say about you? They say you're the kind of doctor they want treating them if they get hit. Not because you're the best surgeon, though you are, but because they know you'll fight for them even when it costs you everything." My father, now 67 and still working at the factory, nodded from his chair. "Mija, I told you the truth comes with a price, but I never told you it also comes with a reward. Look what you've built." The reward wasn't the promotion or the recognition. It was the phone call I received 2 weeks ago from a military doctor at Landstuhl, a young captain who had read about my case and was facing her own moment of choice. "Dr. Rivera, my commanding officer, wants me to discharge a patient who needs surgery. The patient is asking questions about other soldiers who died under suspicious circumstances. I think I'm looking at another cover-up." "What does your medical judgment tell you about the patient?" I asked. "He needs the surgery. Without it, he might not make it." "Then you know what you have to do, and if you need support, call me. You're not alone in this." That night, I called Devon to tell him about the young captain's situation. "Doctor, that's the thing about courage," Devon said. "Once people see it's possible to stand up, they start finding their own strength to do it." He was right. The story, that had started with 40 bullets and 18 hours of surgery, had become something larger. It had become proof that individual conscience could challenge institutional corruption and win. 3 days ago, Devon visited me at Walter Reed. He brought his wife and 2 daughters to meet the doctor who gave Daddy his life back. Watching them embrace in my office, I finally understood what my sister Isabella had meant months earlier. I wasn't just giving soldiers a chance to come home to their families. I was protecting the families themselves. As I watched Devon's daughters laugh and play in the hallway, I realized that courage isn't about the absence of fear. It's about operating with steady hands even when everything you've worked for hangs in the balance. If you take anything from my story, let it be this. When you're faced with choosing between your career and your conscience, choose your conscience every time. You might lose your job, but you'll keep your soul. And sometimes, just sometimes, you'll discover that doing the right thing opens doors you never knew existed. Devon still sends me Christmas cards every year. Last year, his oldest daughter wrote inside, "Thank you for saving my daddy." That's when I knew that 18 hours of surgery was worth a lifetime of consequences.